Welcome back to CIA Declassified. We move from the physical built environment of Project Cinders to the purely energetic invisible environment of Project Pandora. Pandora, active primarily during the late 1970s and early 1980s, was rooted in a single terrifying premise. Could the human brain be remotely manipulated or even compromised using carefully tuned, non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation? The goal wasn't to heat tissue, but to exploit the brain's own subtle electrical activities. We're going to be relying heavily on one specific CIA document that's declassified. It is RDP85-00445R000100030001-4, titled, quote, "The Psycho-Physiological Effects of Pulsed RF Energy on Mammalian Systems." This file represents the agency's deep dive into the 300 megahertz to 30 gigahertz range, the microwave and radio spectrum. The core mission of Pandora was the development of a, quote, "silent field," end quote, weapon, a device capable of projecting focused EM energy to induce specific debilitating symptoms, confusion, severe anxiety, nausea, or profound behavioral changes, all without leaving a physical trace. Document 00445R details three primary vectors for leveraging radio frequency energy to interact with and influence biological systems. The agency sought to understand not just the destructive power of EM energy, but its informational capacity. The vector investigated the thermoelastic expansion effect, often referred to as the Frey effect. The findings: researchers found that specific low-power microwave pulses could induce a recognizable auditory sensation, a clicking, buzzing, or hissing sound, perceived inside of the head without passing through the ears. This effect is caused by the thermal expansion of brain tissue as it absorbs the pulse. Pandora sought to weaponize this by transmitting targeted, distressing verbal messages or disruptive noise directly into the target's consciousness, leading to psychological distress and perceived auditory hallucinations. The goal was to destabilize the target's mental state and undermine their confidence in reality. This vector focused on the direct synchronization or desynchronization of brain waves using modulated RF fields. The findings: the research team hypothesized that by modulating the frequency of the microwave carrier wave to match human brainwave patterns, e.g. alpha, beta, theta, they could enhance or suppress specific cognitive states. For instance, beaming a field modulated to the alpha rhythm, 8 to 12 hertz, associated with relaxation, could theoretically sedate a subject, while a field modulated to a chaotic or disruptive frequency could induce intense cognitive jamming, resulting in difficulty concentrating, motor control issues, and acute confusion. The document notes promising results in inducing measurable performance degradation in laboratory animals. The vector explored the use of focused energy to subtly disrupt the body's non-thermal regulation system, specifically targeting the pituitary and adrenal glands. The findings: Pandora sought a way to trigger biological responses from a distance, specifically to induce the physical symptoms of severe illness, like a high fever or uncontrollable vomiting, without leaving any burn or lesion. The protocol involved precise focusing of energy to a depth that would maximize absorption in the target. The intent was to incapacitate a political figure or operative with what appeared to be a sudden, natural, and severe sickness, allowing for strategic neutralization without the use of poison or a firearm. The document alludes to both internal experimentation and specific tactical applications. Case Study 1, the dormitory pulse, the alleged internal test. This involves heavily redacted passages detailing an, quote, EM testing unit, end quote, deployed near an agency housing facility. The purpose was to study the effect of prolonged low-level exposure on sleep cycles and general mood. The summary suggests results were, quote, highly correlating, end quote, with field strength noting increased reports of irritability, insomnia, and, quote, unaccountable somatic distress, end quote, among residents. Case Study 2, the Perimeter Shield. Pandora research was directly integrated into counterintelligence defense. The concept of an RF shield perimeter was developed, a high-energy field surrounding sensitive installations designed not just to intercept signals, but to induce immediate debilitating vertigo and nausea in any unauthorized personnel attempting to breach the perimeter stealthily. Here's quote number 1. This is from that same CIA file. It's page 68, Memo Strategic Non-Lethal Capability. Quote, "The true strength of RF coercion lies in the target's complete inability to identify the source of the distress. If the subjective experience is interpreted as a medical or psychological failing, the subject will automatically discount external manipulation, thus neutralizing all defensive response." End quote. Now, if we look at Appendix F of document 00445R, similar to the previous project, this section is almost entirely obliterated by black ink titled Duration of Effect and Intergenerational Consequence. Why would the agency go to such lengths to redact this specific aspect of the research? The initial sections of Pandora focused on acute effects, immediate confusion, nausea. The redaction, we hypothesize, covers the single most devastating outcome of the research. The realization that the effects of these EM weapons were persistent, chronic, or potentially heritable. Hypothesis A, chronic and degenerative effects. The, quote, duration of effect, end quote, likely detailed findings that prolonged or repeated exposure to Pandora's frequencies led to long-term degenerative neurological conditions, perhaps Parkinson's, severe chronic headaches, or irreversible cognitive decline. This information would not only be a severe legal liability, but would also classify Pandora as a lethal weapon, violating its original mandate. Hypothesis B, the connection to personnel symptoms. This redacted section is likely the smoking gun connecting Pandora's operational testing to the mysterious debilitating symptoms experienced by diplomats and intelligence officers in high-risk zones globally. If Pandora determined that a pulsed RF field could cause long-term untreatable injury, the agency would have an immense institutional motivation to erase all records that could link their technology to the subsequent real-world incidents. The extreme redaction confirms that the agency found something in the long-term data that was ethically, medically, and politically untenable. They were not just weaponizing energy. They were potentially weaponizing disease and irreversible injury. Project Pandora was eventually curtailed, not because the science failed, but because the ethical and counterintelligence risks were deemed too high. The very technology designed to be untraceable was found to be detectable by sophisticated foreign sensors, creating a potential boomerang threat. Final determination. Feasibility confirmed. Pandora confirmed the feasibility of non-thermal, non-ionizing EM energy to produce measurable psycho-physiological effects, paving the way for further research into targeted brain influence. Dispersion and persistence. Though formally closed, the research findings regarding the Frey effect and behavioral interruption were dispersed into signal intelligence and counter-surveillance units. The long-term effects, hidden behind the thick black ink of Appendix F, remain the project's most disturbing legacy, suggesting that some invisible injuries may have permanent roots in the era of silent technological competition. The CIA learned that controlling a person's physical surroundings was one thing, but controlling the invisible energy that permeates the air around them was the ultimate act of silent coercion. The story of Pandora is a chilling reminder that the threats we face are not always visible. The next time you feel a sudden, inexplicable wave of nausea or confusion, perhaps remember the invisible spectrum of energy that surrounds us. Please like this episode and share it with someone who needs a reminder to question the reality they perceive. Your support is crucial for continuing this deep dive into the classified history of technological research. Now, a final programming note. We move from the manipulation of energy fields to the complete mastery of information, examining the agency's response to the digital age. Our next episode will be about Project Gateway, the global data interrogation and predictive threat modeling. This is a project from the 2000s that marked the agency's massive shift from human-centric intelligence gathering to algorithmic surveillance, creating the infrastructure to interrogate global intelligence feeds, satellite, financial, digital traffic, and put it all into a single predictive analytical model. Tune in next for CIA Declassified, Project Gateway, Global Data Integration, and Predictive Threat Modeling. Until then, remember, maintain your vigilance, question the shadows, and keep your critical thinking sharp. I'll see you in the archives.